Hello, everybody. We're back at it again here. And in today's small business segment, I want to talk about bookkeeping basics. Now, I know for most people, they can't stand the sight of financials or bookkeeping or accounting or anything like that. And I get it. You just want to be busy running your business. You want to be busy, whatever it is, right? But you always need to know, you always need to have some kind of financials or accounting to know where you're going. In this segment, I'm going to talk about why it's important. And first off is, why keep records? Well, it's kind of like monitoring the progress of your business. And I know in previous segments that I've said monitoring the progress is a lot like taking a vacation, right? So how are you going to get from where you're at now to that vacation spot? Are you going to walk? You're going to run? You're going to take a bike? You're going to take a plane? You're going to take a car? How are you going to get there, right? And then, where are you going to stay? You're going to stay at a friend's house? You're going to stay at a Airbnb, what are you going to do? There's a million options, right? And you always need to monitor the progress. If you're spending too much money or, whatever, you kind of need to know these things, right? And then also you need to keep records to prepare financial statements, right? And as far as preparing a profit and loss or a balance sheet, or just, if your bank asks you for financials, as far as you're going to buy a new house, whatever. And this kind of gets back to knowing where you're going and are you going the right direction? I fully understand as a small business, we're going every which direction. We have a million ideas, but in the end, is it making money or is it losing money? Albeit it's good to spend a couple of dollars here and there, but if long term you're not making any money, hey, is it profitable? Should we stay here? Should we go back to our full-time jobs? So it's something to think about. And then one of the things I like to talk about is before you get started. So what I'd recommend in bookkeeping is that before you get started, I would recommend setting up a business bank account. Now, the reason I say set this up is there's something most small business owners, they mix their personal with their business. Now, I think it's a very bad idea, and the IRS recommends do not do that, and because that's something called commingling. Commingling is where you can't tell the difference, and it's all convoluted and going every which direction. Avoid that. Your financial and accounting professional can go over that a little more in detail, but it makes it so much easier from our end, from everyone's end. You can clearly tell what's business, you can clearly tell what's personal, and they can do their whole process if you just keep it separate. Also, what I'd recommend is to have a debit and credit card strictly used for the business. This will help you avoid commingling. And like I said, if everything on credit card XYZ is business, they're going to classify it in some way, shape, or form. And versus if it's commingled, there's a lot of gray area. It's hard to tell what's what and what's going where. But if you have it, like I said, clearly differentiated on that debit or credit card, they'll know what to do, and they'll know that all the interest paid on those expenses goes towards a business expense, and it is deductible. And then before you get started, I would definitely recommend to determine how you're going to get paid. I understand as a small business owner, we're all gung-ho and we hope we make it, and we're all just in that beginner mindset. But you need to develop a long-term plan. Hey, am I going to get paid a W-2 salary? Am I going to keep taking owner draws? Am I going to get equity? What is the process for getting paid? Albeit, it's easy to get caught up in that, but you need to have a game plan. You need to kind of keep your feet on the ground, so to speak, in developing a long-term plan, because we all retire, we all get old, and you need to have Social Security through W-2 and Medicare and all these things that will be taken care of. The next point I'd like to talk about is to have just the most basic bookkeeping system. It doesn't have to be QuickBooks or Oracle or whatever, Microsoft Dynamics. And look, I understand for most businesses, most small businesses, you're pinching pennies. So, you get in where you can. So just keep it basic. I would recommend, I mean, if you're making a couple bucks to get QuickBooks, that's probably the best. But if you don't, I understand. Just do like Excel and just keep the expenses. Okay, $5 in Excel on this date. And if you can, do double entry where the money is going to Walmart for $5 and where the money's coming from. Credit card 123. Cool. All right, basic system. Or if you can, just write it down on a piece of paper. You have these expenses. Certainly as you move up from a starting business to a growing business, I would definitely recommend hiring a bookkeeper in-house versus outsource. I'll leave that up to you. Next, I'd like to talk about expenses versus assets. And just to keep it basic, an expense is something that you can deduct in that year. So let's just say $5 copier paper at Walmart. Okay, cool. You take the expense on 1 year. An asset is something that you take over multiple years. So let's just say you buy a tractor for $15,000. So it's over $500 and lasts longer than a year. So, I mean, I'd have to look at the depreciation, but let's just say 5 to 7 years for depreciation. So you take whatever, 15,000 divided by 5, and that's what you get for each year, right? Well, anyways, so one thing you want to do in the expenses is you want to identify the source of the receipt. So let's just say you get a Target and you buy $50 worth of business expenses. Okay, cool. Keep the receipt, and just at the end of the year, you can have that documentation. And just keep track of, deductible expenses. That's really good. Gas expenses, as far as, you go to Target, you go to Office Depot, wherever. And this kind of gets back to not commingling. If you have everything on, all the business expenses on one credit card or one debit card, it's so easy. Don't make things difficult on yourself. Just put it all on one debit or credit card and just go from there. Also, along the same vein of the whole expenses, is that when you keep good track of things, it'll help you prepare your taxes at the end of the year. I always tell people that taxes are not done at the end of the year. They're done every time you make a transaction, as far as an income or an expense. So you run the credit card at Walmart. That's a it's a business expense. It's a tax deductible business expense, or vice versa. You get income from a client or whatever. It counts as income. It's then and there. And preparing your taxes, it's a process and not an event. So make it easy on your tax preparer. If they can just grab the information and you keep it simple, it'll be simple. If you make it difficult, it's going to be difficult. The bottom line is it's whatever you make it. So make it simple. And then, even that documentation, like I said, it supports the tax return. So worst case scenario, if you get audited, which, cross your fingers you won't, but if you do, all you have to do is here's the tax return, and here's my expenses, and you have a book of documentation. Cool. All right. And they should have minimum expense. They should have minimal problems doing that. And then lastly, in entering all this information, if you do, keep track of everything, it's good to reconcile it. And reconciling, just to kind of give a basic overview, is you take the beginning balance of, let's just say, the bank account or credit card. You do all the expenses and income for that month, right? And then that should equal the ending balance of the debit or credit card. Now, if you do it right, that's kind of a way just to kind of double check, okay, I'm on the right path as far as the bookkeeping. And this, that'll dictate, okay, I have accuracy in doing what I do. And lastly is you want to check the financials, the balance sheet and profit and loss. And what I'd recommend if you're a small business owner is to do it on, let's just say a quarterly or maybe monthly basis, however often you do transactions, just to kind of say, hey, I'm going the right direction, or I'm spending too much on XYZ and I never realized that. That'll help you be successful. It's really easy to get caught up in running your business and being gung-ho about everything. But, you got to keep your feet on the ground. You got to know where you're going. You got to make sure you're taking the right path. We all want you to be successful, but in order to do that, you got to monitor your progress. And the bookkeeping kind of does that. But just a little bit about me. Myself and my partner, we run a bookkeeping company, over 15 years of experience. So I'm very well versed in that. Check us out here. There we go, www.metroacc.com. Small to medium-sized businesses, like and subscribe for more information.